Welcome to the Pastel Podcast, where we chat with pastel artists and take a dive into the vibrant world of pastel painting. Whether you're an experienced artist or just beginning, this podcast brings you inspiring stories and engaging discussions on the joy of painting with pastels. Thanks for tuning in and get ready to add more color into your world. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of the Pastel Podcast. We are thrilled to chat with Lorenzo Chavez. He is one of the true masters of a landscape painting. Born and raised in New Mexico, Lorenzo's love for the Southwest shines through every pastel and oil he creates. With over 40 years as a professional artist and his work featured in top galleries and museums across the country, he's truly one of the greats. We can't wait to dive into his journey, his process, and what keeps him inspired to paint the beauty of the West. So let's jump right in and welcome Lorenzo. Hi, Lorenzo.
Hello.
How are you?
Hi, Lorenzo.
Hello. How are you both doing?
Great.
Are doing great.
Yeah.
Lisa, do you want to jump in with your first question?
I would love to. So, Lorenzo, we're really all curious. How did you get your start in painting and art and pastel?
Well, it's kind of a long story, so hope you don't mind.
Time.
A little long-winded, but it's been a few years. I started way back in, I know high school easily because it was I had a one-man show in high school. And in high school, I knew at that point I wanted to go into the arts of some kind. Had no clue what form that would be. I just wanted to do something in the creative world. And kind of from there, just took that leap of faith and moved up to Denver to attend an art school. And, everything kind of has fallen into place. I really feel I've been very, very lucky with moves I've made and things I've done. And so but it all started from a childhood enjoyment of drawing. I think that's where it all stemmed from. And I still enjoy that aspect of it, just to sit down and sketch in a sketchbook on a piece of paper. It used to be the big chief tablets I would sketch in with a pencil, very simple ways of starting, but it's still highly effective. And so I've just continued that journey. I just want to always be able to do that. So
that's awesome. I love that you knew that from a young age. That's what you wanted to do. Did you start in pastel when you kind of transitioned, through college and, professional career? Or did you start in oil? What was kind of your journey with that?
Yeah. So initially, just starting with pencil and paper, that was my first foray into art. And when I mentioned the show I did in high school, they were all drawings that I did. I used to really enjoy drawing faces, and so that got me started, just that interest in looking at the faces in New Mexico, and didn't really do a lot of landscapes or still lifes or any other subjects. So that was my first entry into it. And I don't know if you remember this, there used to be portrait artists at the malls. And I always thought, well, maybe I'll end up being a portrait artist at the mall. I thought that would have been a dream. But in high school, one of my high school friends that was a year ahead of me had moved after he graduated. He moved up to Denver and attended the Colorado Institute of Art. And he came back when I was a senior. He had already done a year at the Colorado Institute of Art. And so he brought in his portfolio and said, this is what we're doing. And it's like, wow, I was not at all familiar with that realm of the art world, doing commercial art and being paid. And I thought, well, I can be creative and still get a check. And, my parents enjoyed hearing that, because to run off and be an artist is probably scary for any parent, but
right.
That sort of appeased them to say, yeah, okay, commercial art is a viable career. And so I thought that would be something I could do. And while I'm just figuring out what I wanted to do. So I did. I moved up to Denver in the late 70s, 1979. And, worked for a little while in Denver, got my apartment in Capitol Hill, and then worked for Sears for a little while, selling men's suits. And eventually I was able to, a couple of things that happened there. In high school, again, good fortune. One of the young lady I dated, her uncle happened to work for Mountain Bell at the time in Albuquerque. And when I was moving up, he said, well, I know someone up in Denver who is in their art department, get in touch with him and maybe they can, give you a job. And so I contacted that gentleman here in Denver, and it led to a job of me doing pen and ink drawings for the Yellow Pages.
Oh, wow.
And I did that for a few months. But the best part that came out is I met Dolores, who's been my wife now for well over 40 years, married, and she's upstairs right now. So that was the best blessing out of that whole scenario. And I only worked there for about 6 months. And then I started art school at the Colorado Institute of Art. And their whole goal is to train you to become an illustrator / graphic designer, designing brochures, logos, you name it, anything and everything, plus illustration. So I did that. It's a 2-year program. And it was in Denver, and I just I went through the whole program and graduated, actually top of the class, and got a job immediately in the graphic art world. Right after graduating. In fact, I graduated on a Friday and started my job on Monday, and actually had a logo design I had to do over the weekend to get ready. So I immediately got into that. But how does that relate to art? Well, all along I was, yes, this was a way to make an income, but I was also drawing and sketching and doing that sort of thing for my own enjoyment on the side. I continued to do that, always thinking, well, I'll do something with it. I just like that creative aspect. But that got the ball rolling. And eventually what happened is I worked with that company for a number of years as a graphic designer, and then they kind of transitioned. And so I became a freelance graphic designer and did a number of jobs for various companies. But one of them, it led to a job with United Airlines, which was based here in Denver. And they had me meet their art director. And he was sort of working for his own private agency. So I met him at his home and to kind of discuss this project and show him my graphic portfolio. But the thing that really amazed me was he had this amazing art collection. And as I walked around his home, just getting to meet him, he could tell I was really interested in the paintings. It's like, who did that? Who did that? And, and the more and that was our first meeting. And I met him several times during the course of the project. We were doing illustrations for their air training program. And that was fun to go into their whatever they call their planes, or their planes that they practice on, and do some sketches while they work. But through that process, I just got to be with him a lot. And we eventually became really good friends too. But he saw that interest I had in the arts, and eventually we'd start talking about the painters that he had collected, and one thing led to the other. And he's like, you know what, I'd love to have you meet some of these artists, and that opened the door to the fine art world.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, basically, that's so cool.
Yeah. So who were some of those artists that you first met that were in the fine art world that he collected?
Yeah, so the first one, he had a great collection of, I could list a bunch of names. One of the Denver artists, his name was Paul Cotney. And he was a living artist, lived in Denver. He was, probably, I was in my mid-20s by then. And this gentleman, Paul, was probably in his early 50s at that time. And very successful Denver artist. And I went to his place, and he said, bring some art, and I showed it to him, and he's like, I like this. He goes, you know what, I'll do a show for you. And he had this home in Cherry in Denver, which is a nice area. And his wife was a ballerina. So they had built this, he had trained at one point as an architect. So he built this home with a ballet studio essentially in the middle of the home.
Oh, wow.
So this big square open space. And he would host shows. He would just kind of curtain off the mirrors and hang the work. And he said, well, I'll do a show for you. And here was the test. It was like, okay, Lorenzo, I'm going to do a show for you. You got to produce 60 works by this date. And then you've got to get them framed. We've got to create an invitation. We're going to have to mail them out. You're going to have to do all the stuff you have to do to put together a show. And that was, talk about a learning experience. So during that process, I was also doing graphic design, as well. And so my off time, I was drawing, mostly drawing, some watercolors, some pen and some uh, oil wash drawings, a few landscapes, maybe a few still lifes, um, and a few pastels, not too many. One of the things I have to step back relating to pastels in art school, one of the things they had us do is they had us try every medium.
Mhm.
We had to experiment with every medium to create illustration projects. So, acrylic, oil, gouache, watercolor, pastel, pen and ink, we did it all. So I had to buy those tools to do these projects. And so I had a little set of pastels, but I wasn't really using it much at that time. I was probably doing more drawings, but
Yeah.
so back to the show, I, spent all the time I could to develop this work, and then he introduced me to a framer in Denver, and I had to work with the framer and get pricing and get mats, and I had to come. We set a date for it was going to be in November, and so we had to have that timeline, get the invitation designed and shipped and mailed out. Fortunately, he was going to send it to a lot of his clients.
Mhm.
And Cherry Hills Village is a very wealthy neighborhood in Denver, so it was a nice client list. But the fun part was we had the opening. I framed the works at that time. My Dolores, who was my girlfriend at the time, and we were living together, yet my wife. But during that time we decided we were going to get married, and we happened to set a date, which happened to fall in the same weekend as my show.
Of course.
I had the one man opening on Friday, and Dolores and I were married on Saturday.
That is
I always tell
awesome.
people my bachelor party was a one man show. Unfortunately, it went well because I don't know, Dolores may have changed her mind, but we sold half the work, and
Wow.
it opened the door to, a couple of people that came to the show owned galleries in Denver. And so it opened the door for them, inviting me to be in a gallery, my first gallery.
Oh, that's
So
so cool.
yeah, I mean,
Wow.
it's just all kind of dumb luck, really just put yourself out there, do what you love. And, I felt that luck happened. And so I was, yeah, I was just turning 25 when I started with my first gallery in
Wow.
Denver. And that kind of opened that door to that area. I wasn't making enough from the one gallery. So I was still doing, my freelance graphic design as well as showing artwork.
Mhm.
Um, And I mean, I tried all sorts of things at that time. I would do, I was in the one gallery, but I was also doing a thing called the People's Fair. It was an outdoor art fair. One of my fellow classmates at the art student at the Colorado Institute of Art is a gentleman you guys might know, Desmond O'Hagan.
Hmm.
Do you know his work? The pastelist Desmond O'Hagan. He was one of the classmates, and we became really good friends in art school. So occasionally we would do these outdoor festivals together and show work. And in fact, he also had a show with Paul Connie, and that kind of opened the door for his pastel career and fine art career. But yeah, that's kind of what opened the door to the art world. As far as pastel goes, that was a little longer process. I was playing with all mediums at that point, not really settled on one. I was just exploring, and I did that for, gosh, at least 5 years until the late '80s. And then I happened to a couple things happened. They opened the school in Denver called the Art Students League of Denver,
Hmm.
brand new school, and uh, I was at Meininger's, which is our local art store, and he was one of the founders of this
Yeah.
school. And they had this
Oh,
outdoor
cool.
festival, and getting people to sign up, And so I signed up. I was one of the first to sign up for these classes at the Art Students League, and I decided I'd take a class by Mark Daly. At that time in Denver, I had become acquainted with what's called the Denver group of artists.
Hmm.
Mark Daly, Ned Jacob, Tang Cho, George Carlson, Ken Bunn, Len Schmill, Michael Lynch, fantastic artists. And that was sort of what you saw in the galleries in Denver. They were sort of the hot ticket in Denver in the late
Yeah.
70s, early 80s. So a lot of times when I would visit a gallery, I was inspired by seeing their work. So when I saw Mark Daly was teaching, oh my gosh, it's like, yeah, sign me up. on there. He was one of them. One of the other artists I have to acknowledge is a guy named Ramon Kelly, who was also very
I've
much,
never heard of him.
yeah, and fantastic. He wrote a number of books. I'm looking down. I've got his book handy. One of the first art books, one of the very first I ever bought. But Ramon's art was very inspiring, and he did oils, pastels, watercolors, and I enjoyed his style. So I would, look at his style a lot and try to emulate some of the things. And that was an interesting journey there because I found myself going, ooh, and I mentioned I really love doing more faces, and that's kind of what Ramon did. So I did a lot of that in the early days in the art galleries, and then I started getting fairly proficient at that look of the portraits, kind of done in a loose style, reminiscent of Ramon's. And I used to hear these compliments. Oh, you're going to be the next Ramon Kelly. I heard it. I was so flattering, so flattering. Heard it one too many times. And then it was like, oh no,
I need my own style.
Yeah, I'm headed down an avenue that's not good. You're going 90 miles an hour down a dead end street. That's not going to be good. So that was about the time I took that class with Mark Daly at the Art Students League, and I was looking for a change. Like, what could I do different? And I was starting to enjoy landscape painting. In fact, another gentleman, Chuck Bartos, who was one of the artists that showed in one of the second gallery I was with in Denver called Taos Connections, he invited me to go out and plein air paint with him. And I'd never done that. And I had a French easel because they had us buy that in art school. But I said, sure, I'll go, and had no clue. And took my gear. It was during the winter, and we went up to the St. Vrain River, probably not that far from where you are, Kari.
Yeah.
And it was in winter and cold as heck. And, I thought, oh, okay, how hard can this be? I'm in a gallery. I'm showing portraits. Oh, my gosh. It was tough. It's not an easy gig. So that opened that door, and instead of closing it, which it should have said, oh my gosh, that's so hard. I'm, going to stick to portrait. It lit a fire. I was suddenly, I got to figure this out. So that all happened along the times I was at the Art Students League studying with Mark Daly, and one of my fellow students there, a gentleman named Terry Ludwig.
Oh,
love Terry Ludwig.
Kind of a legend. He's a legend now in the pastel world. But when I met him, he was an insurance agent. He was getting ready to retire, but we hit it off in class, and so we'd get together and go sketch and paint. But we were doing oils, and one of the things I think was really profound. I need to share is he had gone to the American Academy of Art in Chicago, where people like Mark Daly went, Richard Schmidt, Dan Gerhardt's, a number of really fine painters, King Cho, and they had a really intense program for art teaching. And so one of the things they have them do is these color charts. You've probably seen them in Richard Schmidt's book, where you take the Rubens palette and you have to mix every color on your palette with white and gradate it with like 5 values. And intermix each color to kind of get a feeling for your colors that you use on your palette. If you don't mind, I'm going to grab my original set I did with Terry Ludwig's help. Here it is. I did them on these canvas boards. They're on canvas sheets. There's the Rubens palette.
Wow.
It's essentially the palette they taught people at the American Academy what to do. And so this first chart, you take the color right out of the tube and mix it with white. And the idea is you're supposed to see the subtle nuances of the value changes from what the value is coming out of the tube to what you can gradate it to with white.
Right.
So obviously yellow is very light value, so your gradation is much more subtle, where black, you get the full spectrum of value. But then you go through each color on this palette and intermix it. And the way it works is here's a cad yellow chart, and what you do is it's heavily leaned towards cad yellow. So let's say 70% cad yellow, and the rest, the other colors. So the next color is yellow ochre, cad red, terra rosa, alizarin crimson, burnt sienna, viridian, cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, and ivory black. And leaned heavily towards cad yellow, and you mix that whole palette, doing the same thing, gradate the values, and you just go through the whole palette, one after the other.
And this is with oil paint.
With oil paint.
Yep.
Yeah, it's an oil painting process, but this wasn't something Mark Daly had us do. This was something that Terry Ludwig had done and really said, "Yeah, I had to do this. Lorenzo, you should do this. I'll walk you through it, tell you how we were taught to do it." And so I did this through his guidance, and he'd come over to, at the time I had a studio that I was renting, and so he'd come over and we'd go paint, but also hang out and talk art and do little things like this. But there was this color chart, and this was the aha moment. So I'm flipping at this time. I'm doing plein air, trying to mix oils. It's hard. Like, how do I get that color outdoors? That subtle shade of orange next to that blue or gray blue. And this chart really helped. But at that time too, I was playing more with pastel, and I was starting to say, God, I really would like to do pastels outside. There was no one really teaching that I was aware of. This was before the internet and before Pastel Journal and before all these great conventions we have. And so, it was like, unless there was a book that came out with the pastel artists, I wasn't familiar who was doing pastel landscapes. But this opened my eyes to, like, you know what? I laid these charts out, and you can kind of see the way they're arranged. It's kind of like a pastel set.
Yeah, totally.
And what it did is I said, you know what? If I just arrange my pastels in this order, I could go out with an organized pastel set. So that became a mission. Like, okay, how do I take them? At that time, there wasn't Heilman or all these other boxes. So it was hard to, like, okay, where are they going to go? Initially, I took, in art school, I bought the 300 set Rembrandt. It came in a nice wooden box, like 3 trays of pastels, and they were organized in this fashion. So I said, I'll take those out. But, that's a heavy thing to take in plein air.
Yeah, especially that many of them.
Foray. Yeah. I would take that out, lay it on the ground, because I didn't have, it was too heavy to set on the easel. And I would paint with the pastels. And through this system, though, relating back to Terry, he finally retired as an insurance agent. And his goal was to go paint. And we often would paint together. Then on the side, he started, using this idea of mixing oil colors, but now as pigments. He would buy little jars of pigment and mix them to make little pastels for his own use. Kind of like, I just was out painting. There's a shade of green. I really would love that. And he'd come back and kind of mix it up and let's see if I could use that next time I go out and paint. So I did this recently. I'll show you. I took one of Terry's eggplant colors, and here's the color from the color charts: alizarin crimson and cobalt blue with white.
And then,
so his initial what's that?
Oh, how did you gradate it? Did you just keep adding a little bit of white over it and blending?
Yeah, for the pastel, I just added white, just like you would in oil. I added a bit of white, and then I just rubbed it into the pastel to get the gradation. And here's the oil one. So first I mixed up this dark color using alizarin crimson and cobalt blue. And then I just added white and just graded it, just like these color charts. In fact, here it is. On this alizarin crimson chart. That's his. So what this, as far as pastel goes, when Terry first made his set using this system, he built his first colors based on these color charts.
Yeah, it looks like his. When you go to buy the sets online and you go to explore his sets that he's created, it looks just like that. It's so cool.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, his first sets were definitely based on this because this was what he had trained. So he was just using the same formula. This color chart basically gives you a formula. Here's burnt sienna with cad yellow, here's the gradation of those colors. So, if you're looking for that particular color in nature, it gives you a recipe. And
Yeah.
so for him, when it was, this is how I remember it for his pastels, when he wanted to get this kind of pastel, that was the formula: burnt sienna, yellow ochre, a little white pigment, and mix it. Of course, now he's using a gum arabic binder to make the pastel sticks. And in the early days, his pastel sticks were very organic. They're almost like hand rolled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not the square pastel we're familiar with, but that sort of, all that happened around the late 80s, and that's what led me into the realm of pastel. And I sort of made a big shift and gave up the other mediums and just focused entirely on pastel going forward. And the goal was to, well, one, it was a challenge because you had these colors that in pastel, how can I organize them? How can I take them outside and use them? And it was a new territory because I at that time I didn't see a lot of people doing it. So I thought, well, I love that because it's sort of a challenge. And at that time, now I mentioned these charts from are very well known from Richard Schmidt's book, right? I got a lot to cover here. You're gonna have to give me yak away. But here's one of the early books. Richard Schmidt Paints Landscapes. I got this. A high school friend of mine found it at UNM, the University of New Mexico bookstore. It was on sale, so he bought it, not knowing anything about it. He thought, I wonder if Lorenzo would like this. He bought it and sent it to me. Wow, what a nice, nice gift. So I was a big, passionate fan of Richard Schmidt as well at that time, as I was getting into landscapes. But here, I have to read you this one section in the book that really lit a spark. There's a line in here where he's talking about different mediums that different painters used. And in here, it's just 2 lines, but he says, another Italian painter, Giuseppe Cascaro, 1863 to 1945, was a master landscape painter using pastel, one of the most difficult of mediums. And I read that. It's like, ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
Another challenge. You got to master the most difficult medium.
Right. It was like, ooh, I love that. Okay, pastel, plein air. What the heck? Let's go for it. It's a good challenge. So that one little sentence in this whole book really lit that spark even more. It's like, okay, that's the universe saying, work in pastel. Meeting Terry, of course, that it was long before he got into pastel. So he wasn't a pastel maker. Eventually he became that pastel maker, but we, in the early days, I'll show you, if you give me a second.
Hey, Lorenzo, I had a book that I had that was called The Unknown Monet. And it was a huge book. It was probably 2.5 inches thick, and it was all of his pastel paintings and his pastel studies. And you just didn't know or didn't hear much about Monet doing pastels. I know that the French Impressionists did a lot of studies or, little sketches and stuff with pastels. But this is an entire book dedicated to Monet's pastels. And I just found that so fascinating. And that one lit a spark under me, like, oh, I can do this too. Like with the landscapes and being out on location. It was just the coolest book. And I love that. Richard Schmidt said the same thing, about how, and you hear that people that don't naturally take to pastels are like, that's the hardest medium. It's so difficult and it's so messy. And like, I know, I love it. And so for some reason it was, and Albert Handel said this on when we interviewed him too, he took to it like a fish to water. And I felt the same way about pastel when I started using pastel. It just took to it like a fish to water. And I'm like, this is my favorite medium.
That's so wonderful. Yeah, I think that's what you see when I've noticed this before again, when teaching workshops, people, the first time they touch pastels, if they sort of go, ooh, they're not going to,
or they go, ooh, or they go, ooh, buttery, like, ooh, that's
exactly.
cool.
Then okay, they're hooked. So one of the things I like when I first felt pastel, I just love that. I just love the medium. When I was a kid in New Mexico, one of the things I love to do is lean myself against the warm adobe wall, and I'd love to put my hand in the. You've been to New Mexico. It's a very arid place, a lot of dirt. But I used to love to put my hands in the dirt and feel that gritty dirt feeling. And the first time I felt pastel, it brought me back to being a kid again. It was like,
Wow.
oh, that just feels so lovely in my hand. I love that
Yeah.
gritty, dirty feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too. Yeah.
Oh, good for you. So
Yeah.
here I got to share this. Now, recently I gave Jeff Ludwig uh, one of the first cases that Terry made for me, but he used to put them in cigar boxes.
Wow.
And so let me open this for you. Before he was even manufacturing them.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
Isn't that cool?
Is that like his first set of Darkest Darks?
It could be.
It
I mean,
could
he was
be.
just
That
playing
is so
around with
cool.
this is so cool. Yeah. So I obviously, used others because he was often just giving me pastels, which was really sweet. Here, try this, try that. But that was an early one. Here was one he made. It was a handmade using foam core, a handmade box. He put some notes on it too for color
That's so
notes.
cool.
But this is his handmade box. This is long before he, had the little black boxes he used. But here's
Yeah.
a.
Wow.
Isn't
Look
that
how
cool?
So
pretty.
cool.
How pretty, pretty. Hey, Kari, we need to remind people too, if they're listening on Spotify, they need to go to YouTube so they can see all of these cool things that Lorenzo is showing us.
Yes.
And watch it on YouTube, and then they get to see and Lorenzo in person too. But wow, because there's some great
I
things.
hope so.
Yeah.
I had to share that. But yeah, he wrote, hopefully there's one in here that you were looking for. Orange, red, brown, yellow ochre.
Wow.
Yeah, he was, I'd come, I'm looking for this certain brown ochre color I see in the landscape. And it was really nice. He'd make it, or we'd sit down in the basement together and mix them up. And,
What
and then
year
eventually
what
I
year
think
do you think these were? What year do you think these boxes were made by Terry Ludwig?
early 90s, because I met him in the kind of about 87, and he was still working as a insurance agent. In fact, I became a policy holder of his, and then he retired, and his goal was to just go paint. And then he started making these pastels kind of early 90s. And I think it just like he would probably show them to people. It's like, ooh, I like those. Can you make some for me? And I think that definitely opened the door for his
Yeah.
business, which made him change directions. He followed that path, and it's been just wonderful. But
And I heard
hope you
that
don't mind me sharing this.
the square design came from painting with you, doing plein air painting with you, and they were rolling off the easel. And so you were kind of painting with you as the inspiration for that square design, so they'd stop rolling.
I wonder, because it was really pretty inventive, and one of the first to do, well, New Pastel did the thin squares, but he had this first soft that I know, the first soft square pastels. And it really, yeah, it definitely doesn't roll off, which, Rembrandts will roll off the
Yeah.
easel or
And it gives you
the
that
palette.
lovely edge too, that you can really get a wonderful
Fine
edge.
lines.
And I love
I
that
know.
design where you can really get some great edges on your work. But that is awesome.
Yes.
When you go out and paint, Lorenzo, how many pastels do you think you bring with you when you go out on location?
So I got another picture to show you. I
Cool.
can't pull my easel out, but I do. Excuse me. Where is that? Okay. So I take this is something else that happened through that process of painting. Like I said, in the early days, I did took full sets of Rembrandts. In fact, I remember one of my first paint trips. I got to know the painter Matt Smith in Arizona, and at the time, this young artist, we were both in our late 20s, but there was another young artist, Dan Young, who I got to meet through a workshop I took with Clyde Aspavig. And so we got to be buddies. And so we took a paint trip to the Northern California, Oregon coast. And it was like a 3-week trip. And Matt picked me up I think it was in, I can't remember, it was at one of the airports in California. And he had his camper and we just painted our way up the coast. And I took this full set of Rembrandts, the 300 colors. And watching those two with their lightweight sets, I was just like, holy cow, this is not going to work.
Yeah.
A big set. So what I did is when I came back, I also happened to know a collector friend who was a woodworker. And I'm just showing you a picture, but he built this small box and it folds, so this is the center pellet.
Yeah.
This folds. There's a piece of thin wood, a thin piece of wood that kind of you push into to kind of hold them into place.
Like a groove or a channel, like slides right over the top.
Yeah,
Does it hold
got
it
a
with,
channel.
Does it hold it with a foam core, or does it is there some kind of foam to push down to keep a soft, or is it all just real hard wood?
It's all wood. He made it out of what was the wood? It was
Birch?
a very lightweight wood. I can't remember the wood, but
Was it balsa or birch?
God, just
I guess
skipping me right now. But yeah, it's a lightweight. I can't remember what type of wood. I have it here close by. If you don't mind, I'll show you how it is without it opening. Anyways, it's was very helpful. Let me get that for you. I'm sorry.
Really helpful. Really helpful
got a
for
pile
doing
of stuff here to share. But I've been using it. The first set, well, originally, this is kind of the third modification.
Oh, wow.
You see, it's just kind of folds up. And what the picture I showed you is when it's open, it opens up like this.
Yeah.
And then these things pull out, and the pastels you saw in that photo are lined up like that. And they're organized in that set. They're organized in the same system as that color chart that I showed you.
Yeah.
It's just a series of, secondary, tertiary colors and value steps to kind of make it organized and simplified so you can kind of find that value and color very quickly outdoors with the changing light. So originally it was a little bigger, and eventually I think this is the third rendition, but I think that the middle section is about a 12 by 16.
Does he still make those?
He does not. He lived in California. His name Bob Wirma. Did you ever meet Bob Wirma?
No.
Bob Wirma used to travel all over the West. He was a retired Los Angeles police officer who just really got into art when he retired. And he would travel all over the West to the art shows, and he befriended a lot of artists. And I know so many artists where he traded art and built some kind of thing for them, something that they needed. I know he built wet painting carriers for me and several boxes, but he built a collection of like 500 paintings just based on trading.
Wow.
That's so cool.
And I mean, I know one of the guys he traded with me in situ, he just was a great guy. He passed away about 5 years ago, but he never got into this as a profession. It was just something he liked to do for artists he got to know, and he would build them kind of custom to your specifications.
Do you still take that one out on location? Do you still take that one out on location?
I do. I just took this recently. I had it with me in Texas. I just taught a workshop in Texas and painted along the way. So yeah, it's been a good companion.
Yeah.
And if it ever breaks, I am going to be out of luck.
So since we're on the subject of plein air painting, Lorenzo, can you kind of walk us through, you and I were talking a little bit earlier about how challenging landscape painting can be, because you go out there and you're just like, okay, how do I narrow out this world into something that's going to fit on this canvas? Can you kind of walk us through your process of how you approach plein air painting, like from the time you get there to like what you're putting on the paper to, what you take back to the studio?
Yeah. So going back to my very first experiences in plein air, I was, as I mentioned, I was really more of a portrait painter. And there, it's really important to have accuracy skills. The nose and the eyes have to be measured. And so my first approach to plein air painting was that approach. I'll measure that tree is that size and that rock is that size. And,
Very
and it
methodical and measured.
very measured. And the paintings look terrible. They did not work. You don't want to just, and so through that process too, I started to go, what is wrong? It works in portrait, but on landscape, it's just not working. What is the problem? So that led to, again, investigating what other artists were doing. And I think the biggest aha moment was picking up Edgar Payne's composition of outdoor art and reading about his compositional stems. And it was like, oh. And then in the early days, Dan Young and I would take these road trips and we would actually try to find locations Edgar Payne painted at. And we would find the spot and it was like, wait a minute, that mountain, he moved it. It's way over there. He moved it over here. What the heck? Can't do that. And look, he made it smaller or he made it taller. And it was like, you can move things.
That artistic
And that
license.
was a big aha moment. It was suddenly like, okay, you're using elements of the landscape, but you're arranging them for more pleasing design. And it kind of related to the composition stems. You could look at and here's the compositional stems.
Yep.
And you've all seen these and they're great. And in the early days, I would go out with the book and try to find, okay, do I see a still yard or L shape, radiating line, S curve? And, sure enough, oh yeah, I see a stream. There's an S curve. And okay, there's a still yard, big shape, little shape. Oh, there's two trees that are equally sized. In the old days, I would just paint them just like they are, but now I'm going to make one smaller. That kind of opened that door to seeing the landscape through the filter of a composition, which really made the paintings work better outdoors. That's so it's really led me to believe that the best paintings created outside are, yes, we're inspired by the color, we're inspired by the feeling of the place, but if there isn't a design or value structure, then they really don't work as a painting. And so it led to looking at the landscape with the eyes of, okay, adjusting. And that really helped the process along, all while still, with the pastel trying to, for me, it was always about getting accurate color, really studying nature, not making color up, but trying to study what nature's teaching. And I still teach that way today, and I still think it's valid. So I don't, I think God is so beautiful. I mean, it's just, I'm looking out the window right now and the fall colors here are just gorgeous. And so people say, well, can I make the painting a little more, it's just kind of subtle. Can I make it splashes? Like, no, just wait till sunset or wait till fall or wait till, you'll get that splashy color. So I think for plein air, it's really a process of, I tell people follow values and color as accurately as possible, but change shapes and change the design. Do you see lines that lead into the painting? Is there a focal point? Can you emphasize that? And sometimes the landscape gives that to you. It's a natural, you see the bright tree or a cabin that becomes a focal point. But when it's not there, what can we do to, maybe the cabin's off to the side and can you move it over so it's now in this focal point? So yeah, there's a lot of fudging in that process.
So speaking of teaching, Lorenzo, so you teach all over the country, is that right? And do you teach only in pastel or do you teach in other mediums?
I originally just taught in pastel. And the very first workshop was through Marty Brent's Art in the Aspen. And I taught, at that time, all I was doing was pastel. That was it. It was just pastel workshops until about 2007. Then I added oil. The oil came about because we moved to Eugene, Oregon
Mhm.
in about the year 2000. I lived out there for 5 years, and pastel and 80 inches of rain a year don't mix.
Not so much.
No, so it was like there was a lot of days I couldn't go outside and paint because pastels, not only if it wasn't raining, the mist in the air.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay, I got to pull these oil paints out again, and if I'm going to
Mhm.
paint plein air out there, I've got to do. So I got me back into oil painting, and since then I've been I kind of, unless I'm teaching, like this coming week, I'm doing a workshop for the Pikes Peak Pastel Society. Then it's all pastel. But if it's a Scottsdale Artist School or some other group, it's usually a mix of oil and pastels,
Yeah. Oh,
which I
wow.
enjoy. It's fun to go back and forth.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
with that, is there anything that you try to, is there any like a specific thing that you try to instill in your students when you're teaching them? Is there a specific technique, or you talked about an aha moment you had, with plein air painting? Is that something that you try to share with your students?
Yes, there sure is. So I follow kind of this process of what I use, outdoors. And one of the first steps is to see, I call it seeing less to see more. So I try to teach them methods of simplifying. So we go into no tones, you know what that is, right? The
Mhm.
dark
Yep.
light design. Um,
Yes.
and that is, I think that's one of the most efficient ways of seeing things very simply, is if on a sunny day, if you can see just the light and shadow pattern and simplify it down to just black and white, you really get you start to simplify things and get rid of all the detail. That's an important first step, is not to see so much detail, but just see the major shapes. So that's one method I start people out with. The other one is to do the four value planes, which John Carlson talks about in his book Landscape Painting. And that's the sky plane, the mountain plane, the upright planes, and the ground plane. And that basically is four shapes. So if you can simplify the landscape down to four shapes, that's another system of really seeing it much simply. And it really is about value in that case.
Hmm.
So squinting your eyes and telling people, okay, really don't look at those upright trees. Yes, compare those values to what you see in the sky. You see, even the brightest bright is not as bright as the sky or the ground. So just simplify them. Just try to turn them into one value first before you add texture and make a
Gotcha.
form with various values. So I find people really find that very helpful. It's one of those aha moments. I think when they get it, they're like, oh, okay, now I can see that essential shape. I often tell people, outdoors we're poets. Indoor in the studio, you can be a novel
Mhm.
writer, but outdoors you have to be a poet. Simplify.
Mhm.
Less is more.
Wow.
And so that's a big aspect of the first few days. And then we get into design, looking at the landscape through the filter of design stems, you know, leading the eye around by looking at things in the landscape that are helpful, or introducing things that would be helpful, moving shapes. Um, and then now you have a design with a simplified kind of first layer to work with. And now you can build the texture over it. Now you can put detail and you can put subtle color changes, and so you're building up to that, um, you know major. You're building first from major shapes to the smaller and smaller shapes. So starting very general to working more and more specific, which I think a lot of you plein air painters do, right? I mean, it's sort of a
Yeah.
natural thing. But when you're new to it, it's amazing how detail is so overwhelming. People we see the detail. It's hard not to see it.
Right.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
yeah, training. So, squint a lot. I remember Richard Schmidt saying squint. He called it the secret squint. Squint to see less. Anything to see just major shapes is very helpful. And I think when people see that for the first time, they can find a process to start painting. Um, So that's one of the modes I teach. Let me grab my workshop booklet. Uh, Got a couple other things here I've got to share. A couple more books I think you would enjoy. This one here, Essentials of Landscape Composition. I hope maybe for those that are listening too, that maybe you can put the name of these books online but this
Yeah,
is
we
by
will.
Leonard Richmond.
Oh, cool.
And in this, he talks about these very simple, like I love this page. Here's the example of the painting, but he's simplifying it down, just block shapes.
Yeah.
There's a tree and there's a still yard right there, right? But I like how he simplified it down, almost like a Mondrian painting.
Yeah.
To see all this detail simplified is an important, big first step. So this book talks a lot about that process of just seeing things very simply. Leonard Richmond, let's see, this book came out probably in the 50s, but they're available now. Oh, actually, 1933
Wow.
is when this first came out. Yeah, but they're available now through Dover, and I highly recommend that to my students. That's one of the processes we use. The Noton. The other one I use a lot is the four value planes, which we're very familiar with in Carlson's book. But let me show you an example. I bring these color boards.
Oh, wow.
And here's a sample of a four value plane.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the color versions of it. Here's the photograph that's a scene in Montana.
Wow.
So it's shape, then value, then line. There's linear movement into the scene, and then textures and colors. Color gradating from warm colors to cool colors, more texture in the foreground, less as it goes back. So it's sort of a nice system, but I have them first do things like this. And I find that I still do that with my own work. And here's another example where you're kind of following that.
It's really helpful.
Yeah, and see it in value. I think the hardest part for me when I started was seeing both value and color at the same time. It takes a little bit of.
I definitely struggled with that.
You did?
Yeah,
what did you do to overcome that?
Oh, I haven't overcome it yet. I'm still struggling. Like I don't know why. It's just, I don't know. There's just something about value that just always throws me off. And then like when you try, like you said, when you try to incorporate color into that, my brain is just like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do.
Yeah, it is a challenge. It is a challenge. So, one of the things I really have them try to do, and I do the same, I still go out and just do a value study, take out the color, because then you're looking at, but you're doing it not from a black and white photo, but from life. And you're looking at color, you're taking away color and just seeing value. And I find that to be very helpful for them. It's a challenge, but then to simplify the value, simplify the shapes to really see the value planes before the color. Once the color's introduced, it throws a curve. It's hard. So just taking one element out, so just focus entirely on value first, is very helpful. Here's another few charts where we're kind of doing the same thing, playing with different horizon lines. I think that's also something that the painter has to learn, is the visual elements. So let me I've got another book to share.
You're getting a wealth of information today.
Oh my gosh, you guys!
I want to. So this one was written by Kevin Weckbach. He's a Denver artist, a visual palette, and this was based on he studied with Kwang Ho. We're so lucky here in Denver. There's a lot of really good painters.
A lot of them
that have lived. Yeah, that have lived here in Denver. So we just are very fortunate to have that. But so in this book, he really talks about, our the visual elements, or I like to change it to the visual language, essentially is these six things: shape, line, value, texture, color, and edge. So when you're looking at a scene, we're looking at a tree or a house or a cloud, that's what we say in our mind, right? We say, oh, I want to paint that rock. It's like, well, don't think of it as rock. What is its shape? What is its edge? And what is its shape compared to the other shapes around it?
Mm-hmm.
What is its edge? Is it hard or soft compared to the other edges around it? You're shifting to this abstract way of thinking
Mm-hmm.
where you are asking the question of the visual language. And this
Comparison
was one of those aha moments. I'm sorry.
and comparisons and relationships.
Exactly. And in a way, this is what really hit is when I was at the Art Students League, one of the things they had us do is we went to this string quartet practice session, and they just let us come and sketch them while they were practicing. And in between their sets, they would communicate in their language, musical language. Made no sense to me as a non-musical person, but it really made sense when I thought, well, that's what we have as painters. We, shape, line, value, texture, color,
Mm-hmm.
edge, that's our language. And so when we shift our thought to those elements, we can see them more. We can compare edges to edges, color to color, value to value. But when we put a name on it, it's a house. That's like, how do you paint a house? Ooh, oh. When you say, well, that house is okay, it's a hard edge compared to the tree next to it. It's a hard edge against a soft edge. That's it. And it's a darker value against a lighter value. Yeah, okay. It starts to make pictorial sense. And that's one of those aha moments too. I think they start to realize, oh, okay. So you shift your way of thinking, and it's hard to do. So one of the things Kwang Ho talked about in one of his lectures was he said, imagine Helen Keller gaining sight for the very first time. And words didn't make sense, right? You saw shape you saw shape, value, color just on a pictorial basis, just on a visual basis without a name. You wouldn't be able to say, oh, that's a car. I'd never seen a car. I'd never seen a boat. I'd never seen a dog, cat. But you just see shape, value, all those. It's really interesting
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
shift our perception. In a way, I tell them it's like, if you've ever read the right drawing on the right side of the brain, there's an exercise where she had people turn a portrait of Abraham Lincoln upside down.
Yeah.
And they did a much better job drawing it when it was upside down because their mind shifted to that right brain.
Yeah.
And that's what, when we do this, ask those questions of, the visual language, it does shift our mind.
Yeah.
Anyway,
That's awesome.
that's one of the other practices we do. I actually tell them this. I said, when we're painting, when I come up to you, I don't want you to tell me you're painting that tree or that grass. Describe it in the visual language.
Yeah. We
I'm
do have
painting
our
that
own.
edge.
Yeah, we have
What's
our own
that?
language. We have our own language as artists, which is when you're around your artist friends or when I'm around my artist friends, it's like, oh, this is awesome. We all understand each other and we're sharing the same language and the same passion for what we do. And you have these wonderful conversations and diving into, our technique and our process and, what are you doing here? And how do you approach that? It's awesome. It's just,
Yeah, isn't it awesome? I mean, we're so used to it that I don't know, maybe we don't get, but for someone new, it's sort of like, oh, if they sat down with a group of painters, like you said, Lisa, it'd be like, oh, I love the shapes you have in that. And you're like, shape? What do you mean? I see a barn, or I see.
I need more of it. I need more of those conversations, like we
I know, right?
don't get enough of them. And I relate a lot of the musical language too to art, because we're composing, we're composing our paintings, we're creating, a symphony, like some of my waves. I wonder if I plotted a musical graph or a staff, and then plotted the points of this wave, what would that sound like, on the shapes of this wave, like I was thinking, oh, that would be fascinating to see what would that sound like, if I
That'd
played
be
it.
interesting. I know it'd be fun to like have that put to music. It would be
Oh,
that'd make a
yeah.
wonderful show.
So cool.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I think because music and painting are sort of music is listening. And I'm talking about music without lyrics, right?
Right.
In painting, there's no words. We're not using words to communicate. We're using other elements.
Yeah.
And one of the artists, actually, Clyde, I took a workshop with Clyde Aspavig, and he really talked a lot about musical rhythm in the landscape. So one thing
Mm-hmm.
that helped a lot, I remember painting up in the mountains here in Colorado, and he was talking about the musical rhythm of the pine tree against the sky. And look at the way the edge of the pine, look at the various positive and negative shapes, and think of it in a musical way. And that was an eye opener too.
Mm-hmm.
Lisa was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, okay. There's a rhythm to
Yeah.
that shape,
Yeah.
and it's very poetic and beautiful."
Totally.
Anyway,
Completely. Completely. Wow.
So we're
yeah,
coming up
yeah,
close on our time. I have another question I want to ask you, Lorenzo,
sure.
is you've been painting for over 40 years. I mean, that's such an extensive career. What keeps you curious? What keeps you motivated to, explore new techniques or ideas or, landscapes, things like that? How do you keep yourself fresh?
Yeah, I think for a landscape painter, just when I go outside and now a change of season like we're having, that's inspiring. But just we need to feed ourselves with inspiration, and so going to a landscape as a landscape painter it's important. I remember listening to this interview. It was online, but they were talking to Andrew Wyeth, and he was talking about that our inspiration comes from this well. And as we're painting, we're pulling from that well of inspiration. And he said, eventually that well runs dry and you've got to get outside and fill it up again. And I think
Yes.
that is so true. So going outdoors, going to an art show, sometimes, listening to a podcast, looking at a great art book just gets us kind of lights that fire again, fills that well up. And I think occasionally we need to do that just to say, okay, I've run dry. Let me go out. I don't need to even paint. I just need to go out and immerse
Mhm.
myself in the landscape. And I would assume that's true with the figure painter. Go out and paint a live figure again, or go out and do a portrait. So
Yeah.
those are tools I use. There's also a game I play. This is kind of a funny studio game, but let me show you. It's a game of cards. You got all these landscape. So I pick up a stack of, this is when I'm in the studio and don't know what I want to do. I pick up a stack of random photos. They're somewhat curated, shuffle them. And then the first one I turn over. Ooh, that's a nice one. That's what
That's
I'll
what you're
paint.
going to paint.
That's what I'm gonna paint. And I do it for like an hour. It's a short little session, but it gets
Mhm.
me to paint, and
I
then if
need to do
I'm,
that. I definitely have that issue where I get to the studio and I'm like, I don't know where to even begin.
Wow.
yeah, so this
That's
is
a
kind of a
fun.
blind, and I'll do that in the class. If they're like, I don't know what to paint, I have them do that. I'll say, well, if it's easier with a print photo than if it's on your phone to flip.
Right.
Because what I found I was doing in the studio when I was not that inspired, I would sit there and flip through photo after photo after photo. Oh, okay, no, I don't want to paint that. No. And then I just did get to work. But when I have to force myself to make something,
Mm-hmm.
it felt more like plein air. Like when you're outside, it's just like, oh, there it is. It's very inspiring. and you can't control the lighting or the situation.
Mhm.
So you really jump right into painting. But in the studio, it's if there isn't something we're anxious to paint, this helps us get the ball rolling, I guess.
That's such a
So
great helpful tip. I need to do that.
Yeah.
Because I do the
here's
same thing.
another
I sit
tip
there and flip through my phone and I'm like, oh, that's pretty, but I don't know. Oh, I like that one, but I don't know.
Curate a deck of inspirational landscapes. That's awesome.
exactly, and keep it, keep 20. I keep 20 on the desk, and when I don't know what to do, boom, I do know what to do. It's like, here's another trick I like to use. Let me grab it. It's so this kind of goes back to the graphic design days where we had what was called morgues, when you needed to find a file of like, oh, I need to paint bunnies. You had a file of bunnies,
Uh-huh.
or your dogs, and they called them morgues. And there was just these, it was pre-internet. So it was all these
Yeah.
files of all this reference. And you would just, there you go. You had a file. So what I do is I like to paint print photos. So here's my desert landscape file. It's a notebook with
Oh, wow.
various
Reference.
references. And if I feel like a winter scene, you'll see behind me, I have
Oh
winter
yeah.
scenes, seascapes, cloud scenes.
Wow.
And so
That's really cool.
so then it's like, okay, I feel like painting a desert scene, and I don't have to shuffle through, hundreds of photos trying to find that particular scene. Is sort of so building a file system of maybe subjects you really enjoy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I really enjoy painting my home state in New Mexico. So I have a whole file of New Mexico scenes that I just, when I feel like I want to revisit New Mexico, pull those out, or Colorado mountains. Whoa. If I'm not going to the actual place, that's even better when you get to go to the actual place.
Yeah.
When are you coming to California?
Well, I would love to. I was actually, I used to go up and teach through the Pastel Society of, it's called the three Ps, three CPs.
Three
The
CPs.
Central Coast Pastel Society.
Oh.
And they were
yeah.
just north of Santa Barbara.
Uh-huh.
And we would often paint around Morro Bay.
Yeah, it's
And I was
beautiful.
going up there quite a bit. I loved it. And so I think that group disbanded.
Yeah,
But
I'm not familiar with that group. So
yeah, they disbanded a couple of years ago. So I taught up there a couple of years ago, in the Morro Bay area. But yeah, I would love to come. I mean, I was supposed to come out to the Pastel Society of the West Coast, but it was 2020 when
of
we had this
course.
workshop book. So of
Mhm.
course that didn't happen. But I'd be happy to come out if you have a
Wow.
group you want to.
Yeah.
I'd
So
love
are
it.
you, I know that Lorenzo, you said you've been adding some things to YouTube recently. Do you also, aside from the workshop you're doing with the Pikes Peak Pastel Society, do you have any other workshops coming up soon?
I do. So that's my last one for this year. Uh, Usually the last workshop I teach is October for travel, and then I'll
Yeah.
pick it up again in the spring. So this spring, I jotted down the names of the places I have. This coming up is I'm doing a workshop with UArt pastel
Okay,
papers,
yeah.
which
Cool.
is okay. We didn't get it. Oh man, there's so much we haven't covered. I know. So typically I use Canson paper. Um, and that's my favorite paper. I love Canson Moonstone, the smooth side. Um, just love it, and I still that's my favorite paper. But a few years back, UArt contacted me and said, "We'd like to have you do a workshop," and I said, "Sure." And then I thought, "Oh, I better practice on you." So I did, and it's a great paper. I really enjoyed working with the UArt paper. So I'm going to be doing with one in part here locally with UArt, and then I'm teaching a workshop in Cloudcroft, New Mexico in July, and in Paladero Canyon in October. And then I'm still negotiating with Steamboat Springs for September during their plein air event. The Steamboat Springs Art Museum has an annual plein air event. So we're talking about a possible workshop there. Um, but then I do teach locally through the Art Students League of Denver during the winter months. I'm indoor indoors, but during the summer months, we're early spring or late spring and into fall, we're painting plein air. Uh, so if you're ever in the Denver area on a Monday that I teach Mondays, you're welcome to join my class. Come and paint.
Oh, that'd be
Yes.
so
That'd be fun.
awesome.
I'll have to do that sometime.
Oh,
Yeah.
Kari, I'm gonna have to join you. I
Yeah.
have to come out there and do that. I'll be
So
so
we're
wonderful.
coming up on, we're a little over an hour now. Lorenzo, this has been such a fabulous conversation with you. Is there anything else that you want to leave our listeners with today? Any other little nuggets of Lorenzo?
Oh, I think, oh gosh, well, couple gems I got from the mentors. I mentioned my artist friend who passed away, Ned Jacob. And one of the things, I met him early on. I was in my kind of, this is about 88, 80. So I was in my late 20s. And, I asked him advice, like, what do I'm having trouble with this painting. What should he do? And his advice was always, well, are you drawing enough? Well, yeah, but I'm having trouble with, no, are you drawing enough? Are you drawing? They'd be like, I'm having trouble with my girlfriend. Are you drawing enough? My car doesn't start. Are you drawing enough? That was a big thing. So always keep a sketchbook at hand, always sketch and draw. That was a bit of information. He also advised me at that time. I was asking him about, you know, is it worth an artist to have a studio away from the home? And he's like, yes, get a studio. He says it's more professional. The dealers will take you more professionally. The collectors will take you more professionally. So I rented a studio for about 10 years away from home, and it was a game changer. That opened the door to a lot of things, and I'm glad I took his advice on that. Uh, so one of the other things I want to share, the painter Mark Daly, who I mentioned I took classes with, he brought in this book. I'm going to grab it, and it's a fun. You're going to find this interesting, but he came to class. He said,
Zen
"This
in
is
the
the
art of
best art
painting or
book."
in the art of writing.
Right? Have you heard of this one?
I have not.
So Mark Daly, who's a painter, said, "This is the best book on painting there's ever been."
And it's
Like,
called
what is
writing.
art in the art of writing? It's got nothing to do with painting, but it's about Zen. Ray Bradbury's a writer,
Yeah.
and he's talking about the process of being a writer. All the things you deal with, like practicing. He would spend an hour, kind of like we talked about the quick sketches. He would just spend an hour just tight writing, no matter what. But one of the things one of the things I remember most in this book that had the biggest profound effect was midway through the book, he says 50% of a writer's success, and I just changed it to 50% of an artist's success or a painter's success. And Ray Bradbury said 50% of a writer's success is their zest or gusto for what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that. It at first is like, wait a minute, 50%? 50%? That's if that's an ingredient in a recipe, that's a huge portion.
Yeah.
It was enormous. And it was like, oh, you're telling me I got to have fun with this? I should be enjoying this. I should have passion about this. Okay. Well, that's so whenever I'm in the midst of a painting and I'm sort of, the mechanical process happens, and that's what he talks about in this book, all the mechanics we do, the values, edges, all that we talked about, shapes, design. Then at some point you just have to say, this is fun. Look at that color of that tree. Wow. We get to look at that color of the tree for an hour. Isn't that cool? I mean, how many people get to do that? Look at that color of that tree compared to that tree. That's pretty cool.
Wow.
I don't know. And that sort of reminding yourself to have that zest and gusto for the process, that was really helpful when Mark Daly recommended it. I was just like, okay, that's
the joy of painting, bringing the joy in painting back, or bringing
yeah. I mean,
your process.
And I tell people, in fact, the latest workshop, I said, I want you either having a good time or just be mad as hell. Paint with some emotion, paint with anger, or paint with love or fun, but never sort of medium temperament. Anyway.
I think we need to do a second part 2 with Lorenzo Chavez.
Well, of course, I would love that. There's stacks of things I had here to share, but
yeah.
Do you have time for one more?
Yes, let's do it.
Let's do
We're
it.
already there.
I think that.
So one thing. Okay, so here's one thing in plein air that I was reading a book about the painter Corot, the famous French painter. And in the book, he said when he goes out to paint, he sets out a little square of black and a square of white.
Oh.
And of course, you're seeing here, this is not white, or this is not black. So you got to kind of make it really black. See the inside of that?
Yeah.
And here's white, and that's got to be against the bright white. Mm-hmm. So he said, you put those out and it gives you the value scale. When you think of values, now look at the things behind me, and what are the values compared to black or white?
Wow.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So we set these out in the field in front of us, and then I tell people, okay, now find the next dark as that. You see the inside?
Yeah.
As dark as that. And see if you can spot it. And they're always like, suddenly the color awareness, like, wow, okay, right? I thought that pine tree was dark, but compared to that, no, there's the dark in the pine tree's got some violet. It's got some color in it. It's not black.
Yeah.
And white, compared to a cloud, you're like, wow, that cloud's got a lot of pinks and yellow.
Yeah.
Of course, this is much more effective outdoors. I hope you'll.
Right.
Yeah.
So that he recommended a black piece of felt and a white piece of linen. And he was very specific about that material. So, and that was Corot. I thought that was fun
that's a great tip.
That.
I think I'm going to try that.
Yeah,
I definitely have to try that because it's one of those thing I love about. Sorry, we're all talking over each other.
Sorry.
That's one of the things I love about. I've definitely been taking more notes on the colors you see in nature because you're right. A cloud is not white. There's so many nuances to it. There's pinks and peaches and there's grays and purples and there's so many different colors in every little thing. I want to be able to see the violets in a tree because when I look at it, I'm like, that's just a green tree. So I love that idea of, okay, now compare it to black. What do you see? What are all the colors that you see? That's such a fabulous idea.
Yep. I love it. That's a great tip.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah. It's what we do as artists. We're, trained like musicians, I would imagine, are training their ear. We're training our eye to see these nuances of color and value. And the more you do it, and I think especially helpful in plein air to study it that way. That's where we really build that eye. But it does help to have comparisons, look at that compared to that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So
Lorenzo,
lots to do. We got to go out and paint.
I know.
I'm so excited.
I wish we were going right now.
Yeah.
So exciting. Lorenzo, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. I know you have been very busy and this was so enlightening. This was such a fun conversation.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for taking the time to share all your wonderful knowledge with us.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate you doing this. This is just fabulous. Wish you all the best. This is inspiring for the ones I've seen you do before this. It's been this, that's all. Yeah. A lot to live up to. I don't know.
Oh, I think
you did a fantastic job.
It was great information. Everybody's going to love it.
Yeah, I love the first one. Kim, of course, is an old friend of mine. And so it was wonderful to see hers as your first. So,
she's coming here.
Kim, if you happen to watch.
She's coming here to stay with me for the Catalina Conservancy show. And so she's going to be here on Wednesday. And so spend the weekend together. And I'm going to be her date for the artist dinner that they have for the Catalina.
Nice.
For the
Catalina. Please give her a hug.
Hi.
I will. Yeah, it's great to spend time with her. So speaking of United Airlines too, she was a United Airlines flight attendant. So when you said that about United Airlines, and then when I first found out about her, I was flying for American Airlines. So
really,
and then I was a graphic design major too. But travel. I
Wow.
love travel. So anyway, I can't wait to tell her that we got to interview you, Lorenzo, and how wonderful this interview's been.
Well, thank you both so much, and happy painting.
Happy
Thank
painting.
you.
Yeah.
You too.
Thank you.
Well, everyone, thank you so much. That's our show for today. And I just want to remind you all that the Pastel Podcast is brought to you by Pastel Today, the free weekly e-newsletter for all things pastel related. And check it out at pasteltoday.com. And you can also find this episode and show notes for all of our other episodes at thepastelpodcast.com. And until then, stay vibrant.
Stay vibrant. Thank you, Kari.